What do you do when your kids ignore you, question you, or talk to you as if everything you did for them doesn't matter? Maybe you've tried reasoning, yelling, or even pulling out the classic, "When I was your age, I would have never dared to speak to my mother like that." And yet here you are, feeling that mix of frustration, sadness, and a hint of resignation that just won't settle. I'm Gabriel, and I want to tell you something. You're not alone in feeling this way. But more importantly, you're not stuck in this dynamic forever. Sometimes what feels like an external problem, your children's lack of respect, their distance, or their defiant attitude, can be completely transformed if we look inward and approach things with a wiser, more stoic mindset. Today we're going to walk through 9 steps that will not only help you regain your emotional balance, but could also profoundly transform your relationship with your children. And trust me, the last step is something that could completely change the way you see this conflict. Stay with me. Number 1, stop reacting and start responding calmly. Imagine this scenario. On any given day, your kids raise their voices at you or throw that comment that hurts more than you'd like to admit. Before you can even think, you're already saying something that deep down you know won't help. "How can you talk to me like that after everything I've done for you?" The words come out forcefully, driven by pain, but instead of solving anything, they seem to fuel the conflict even more. And there you are, trapped in a cycle where emotions take control and relationships get even more strained. Breathe before reacting. Sounds simple, right? But it's probably one of the most difficult and transformative things you can do. The Stoics, masters of calm and mental clarity, reminded us that it's not situations that affect us, but how we choose to interpret them. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That phrase isn't just philosophical reflection. It's a practical guide to breaking the automatic patterns that so often end up distancing us from those we love. When you react immediately, you're letting instincts and the emotions of the moment dictate your words and actions. But if you choose to respond calmly, you're doing something entirely different. You're taking control of the situation. You're creating a space, even if it's small, to reflect before acting, to decide if this conflict deserves your energy, or if, perhaps, the best thing you can do is face it from a place of serenity. It doesn't mean you should accept disrespect without doing anything. On the contrary, acting calmly is an act of personal power, because when you lose control, you hand over your power to circumstances and to others. But when you choose to respond with clarity, it's like raising an invisible shield that protects you from the chaos. It's a reminder to yourself and to those around you that you are not at the mercy of the emotions of the moment. The next time your kids are disrespectful, try something different. Instead of letting yourself be carried away by indignation or sadness, take a moment to observe the situation. Ask yourself, what is this behavior telling me? Is it about me or about them? Often, their words reflect more of their own internal struggles than any truth about you. This doesn't mean you should justify everything, but it does mean understanding that not every attack deserves an impulsive response. When you see things from this perspective, you realize you don't need to engage in the fight. You can choose to stay firm and calm. Responding calmly is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It's showing that you don't need to yell to be heard, nor do you need to impose your authority to be respected. It's teaching your children a lesson without even saying a word, that mutual respect starts with setting the example. And when they see that despite their words, you don't lose your balance, something changes. Maybe not immediately, but that calmness is like a seed that slowly grows, showing them there's a different way to communicate and relate. The key is to remember that you can't control how others treat you, but you can decide how you respond. In the end, your calmness is not just for them, it's for you. It's the gift you give yourself to avoid being consumed by conflict. To remember that even in the midst of emotional storms, you can be the lighthouse that lights the way to peace. Number 2, don't aim to win, aim to understand. It's funny how arguments with our kids sometimes feel like an emotional chess match. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and everything falls apart. You try to defend your point of view, hoping that, in the end, they'll understand what you're trying to tell them. But what happens? Every word you say seems to strengthen their resistance, as if the conversation is about proving who's right rather than truly connecting. The irony is that by trying to win, what you're really losing is the relationship. A few years ago, I met a woman named Rose at a practical philosophy workshop. Rose was 68 years old and had 2 adult children with whom she had tense relationships. Every time I try to talk to them, we end up arguing, she told me, frustrated. She explained that her younger son, Jake, always had a sarcastic comment whenever she suggested something. It's like he's just waiting for anything to attack me. Of course, I don't stay quiet, but in the end, I'm left with this bitter feeling. What am I doing wrong? I asked her what she was trying to achieve in those conversations. Well, I want him to understand that I have experience, that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm not saying things just to bother him, she replied. And there it was. Rose didn't just want to have a conversation, she wanted to win. She wanted her son to acknowledge her wisdom, her sacrifice, her authority. But the more she tried to assert herself, the more Jake shut the door to communication. I suggested something simple. The next time they talked, instead of trying to prove her point, she should try listening without interrupting or correcting. Just listen. Rose agreed, somewhat skeptically, but she was willing to try. A couple of weeks later, she wrote to me to share that she had a different kind of conversation with Jake. This time, when he started venting about work and how exhausted he was, instead of throwing a solution at him or hitting him with an "I told you so," she simply listened, not to respond but to understand. It was strange, she said. At first I had to bite my tongue not to tell him what I thought, but then I realized something. He needed to vent, not for me to solve his life. For the first time in years, Jake ended that conversation by saying, "Thanks for listening, Mom." Rose hadn't won an argument, but she had gained something much more valuable, a connection. The truth is, most of the time, it's not about who's right. In our relationships, especially with our children, understanding should matter more than imposing your perspective. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoics, said, "If you can, correct someone. If not, remember that understanding is always an option." By trying to win, you lose the chance to build a bridge, to step into their world and show them that, even if you disagree, you're willing to listen with respect and love. Sometimes listening hurts because you come across truths you didn't expect or complaints that aren't entirely fair. But in that act of listening, without rushing to respond, without aiming to win, you offer something more valuable than your words, your presence. You're telling them, without having to shout, that you're there for them, that you don't need to have the last word to prove your worth. In the end, it's not about who's right, but about whether that conversation brings you closer or pushes you further away from the people you love. Think about this. What would you rather win, the argument or the relationship? In the calmness of listening and understanding, you sometimes find answers you didn't even know you were looking for. And in that space where no one wins, something magical happens. The possibility for both of you to grow. Number 3, teach by example, not by words. "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say," wrote Ralph Waldo Emerson, and there's no phrase more fitting for the relationship between parents and children. So often, the advice we give our kids falls on deaf ears, not because it's wrong, but because our actions contradict it. We tell them to be patient, but they see us lose our temper. We ask them to value family, but but they find us distant. And then the conflict arises. They don't listen to what we say because they're watching what we do. When you try to change the dynamic with your kids, the first step is to look inward and ask yourself, what am I teaching them through my actions? It's not about blaming yourself, but about recognizing that true respect doesn't come from imposing it. It comes from inspiring it. If you want them to learn to listen, listen first. If you want them to be more empathetic, show them empathy even in difficult moments. And if you want them to value you, value yourself because they notice more than you think. Here's an exercise you can try right now. Think of a recent situation where you felt your kids didn't respect you or weren't listening. Write it down, but not from a place of indignation. Approach it with reflection. Ask yourself, how did I behave in that moment? Did I show the kind of patience, wisdom, or firmness that I expect from them? Now choose one small action you can change in yourself the next time something similar happens. For example, if you tend to interrupt them when they speak, decide to wait until they finish, even if what they're saying feels unfair. This act, so simple yet so powerful, can be the first step toward creating a more respectful dialogue. If, up to this point, you feel these ideas are resonating with you and helping you rethink how to build stronger and more authentic relationships with your children, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Also, let me know where you're watching from and which reflection has impacted you the most so far. Knowing that these words are making a difference in your life is what gives meaning to this space. Remember, kids don't need perfect speeches. They need role models who inspire them. Your daily actions, as small as they may seem, have a much greater impact than you imagine. Every time you choose to respond calmly, listen attentively, or show firmness without losing respect, you are planting seeds that will eventually bear fruit. Because in the end, it's not about being the perfect parent, it's about being genuine. And in that authenticity, you often find the most powerful lesson you can give them. Number 4, accept your responsibility without carrying all the weight. It's interesting how the title of father or mother comes loaded with unwritten expectations. From the day your children come into the world, you're told that you're now responsible for them, their well-being, their education, their happiness. And it seems like that list never ends. What no one tells you is that you'll also have to deal with their criticism, their complaints, and at times, their ingratitude. As if everything you did, everything you gave, could be summed up with a simple, "But you were never there when I needed you." And that's where the conflict begins, between what you feel you gave and what they believe was missing. Stoicism teaches us something valuable about responsibility. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it hurts, it's because it's within your power to change it." This phrase, which can feel like a bucket of cold water, doesn't mean you should take all the blame. It means you should accept what's within your control, your actions, your words, and your willingness to improve. But here's the important part. It also reminds us that not everything is in your hands. You may have given everything as a parent, but you cannot control how your children interpret or remember those efforts. Accepting your responsibility doesn't mean punishing yourself for every mistake from the past. It means honestly acknowledging what you did right, recognizing what you could have done better, and most importantly, acting in the present with intention. Maybe at some point, you prioritized work because you thought ensuring their future was the best way to show love. Maybe you didn't know how to handle certain emotional situations because no one ever taught you how. And that's okay. That's already part of the past, and beating yourself up over it forever doesn't change anything. But what you can do is ask yourself, what can I do now to improve this relationship? Here's an exercise for you. Find a quiet moment and write a letter, not to your children, but to yourself. In it, acknowledge the things you did as a parent that you consider achievements, no matter how small. Then, write about the moments when you feel you failed or didn't live up to your own expectations. But here's the key. End the letter with a phrase reminding yourself that you're not perfect, that you did the best you could with what you had at that moment. Keep it as a reminder that being a parent is a journey full of learning, not a test where you always have to score the highest. And when you're ready, take that reflection to the next level. Talk to your children, not to defend yourself or to get them to agree with you, but to say something like, "I know I wasn't always perfect, but I always tried to do what was best for you, and I'm still here, willing to build something better if you're willing to." Sometimes the simple act of acknowledging our humanity opens a door that perfect words never could. The truth is, you don't need to be the perfect parent. What you need is to be genuine, to be willing to accept what's yours and let go of what's not. Because carrying all the weight is not only unfair, it's pointless. When you accept your responsibility with wisdom and without guilt, you give your children a lesson that goes beyond words. You teach them to face their own mistakes with courage, to apologize when necessary, and above all, to understand that love isn't based on perfection, but on the willingness to keep trying over and over again. Number 5. Learn to set boundaries without guilt. In 1927, a woman named Dorothy Parker, a writer and member of the legendary Algonquin Round Table, left us with a phrase that still resonates today. The art of life is saying no without guilt. Parker, known for her sharp wit and ability to set boundaries even in the most demanding literary circles, understood something many of us learn the hard way. You can't be there for everyone all the time, and saying yes to everyone is often a way of saying no to yourself. Now imagine applying this idea to your relationship with your children. From the moment they're born, it's as if part of you is programmed to give everything, without pause or conditions. At first, of course, it makes sense. Babies depend on us for everything. But then they grow, and what was once a basic need gradually turns into emotional, financial, time, and energy demands. And you, being a good parent, keep saying yes because you fear that a no will translate into rejection, being seen as selfish or worse, that crushing guilt that seems to come with every difficult decision. Parker's insight reminds us that setting boundaries is not a lack of love. It's a way of protecting your well-being and, interestingly, also the relationship you have with others. Looking at Stoic philosophy, we find Epictetus expressing something similar in a more austere way. Do not carry what is not yours. How many times have you taken on problems, demands, or even criticisms that weren't yours to bear, just to avoid conflict or guilt? What inevitably happens is that this extra weight drains you, turning a relationship that could be nurturing into a constant source of tension. Setting boundaries doesn't mean closing yourself off completely or stopping being generous with your children. It means defining how far you can go without neglecting yourself. And this not only benefits you, it also teaches them a valuable lesson. Understanding that not everything revolves around them, that healthy relationships have clear boundaries, and that respect is not a one-way street. Let's think of a practical example. Maybe your adult child constantly turns to you for money. They might justify it with phrases like, "I can always count on you, right?" And of course, there's the emotional trap, flattering you while placing the burden of their responsibility on your shoulders. Saying no in this case might feel like a betrayal of your role as a parent, but what you're actually doing is giving them a chance to grow. You're not denying them help. You're inviting them to find their own solutions, to face the consequences of their choices, and to mature. Think of historical figures who set clear boundaries to protect what they valued most. Gandhi, for example, led an entire movement based on peacefully but firmly saying no to the British Empire. His refusal was not an act of violent confrontation, but a declaration of dignity and values. And that same dignity is what you need to apply in your daily life. You don't have to be aggressive or harsh. A firm and respectful boundary is enough to remind your children that while you love them, you also have your own needs and rights. Saying no calmly and without guilt is an act of courage. It's understanding that your love for your children isn't measured by how many sacrifices you make, but by your ability to be honest with yourself and with them. In the end, boundaries don't push people away. When established with respect and clarity, they have the power to strengthen relationships because they eliminate resentment and promote a healthier balance. So, the next time you're faced with a demand that threatens your inner peace, remember Dorothy Parker and the Stoics. Ask yourself, is this really mine to carry? If the answer is no, be confident that a well-set boundary is not a selfish act, but a declaration of self-love and respect toward the relationship you value so much. Number 6, don't take rejection personally. Imagine you are a tree in the middle of a forest. You've grown tall, strong, with deep roots that have endured storms and droughts. Over the years, your branches have offered shade to those passing by, and your fruits have fed more than a few along their journeys. But one day, you realize some people no longer stop. They walk past, ignoring your shade, not taking your fruits, not even glancing your way. You start to wonder what you did wrong. Is your shade not cool enough? Are your fruits no longer sweet? Maybe you think you should have grown differently, stretched your branches in another direction. But while you're consumed by these thoughts, you overlook something crucial. Those who pass by aren't doing so because something is wrong with you. They're simply too busy searching for their own path. In our relationships with our children, it's easy to feel like their distance or lack of attention is a form of judgment against us, as if their behavior is a silent message saying, "You didn't do enough," or "You weren't what I needed." But the truth, and here's the uncomfortable part, is that most of the time, it's not about you. Like the tree in the forest, your role is not to ensure everyone who passes by stays under your branches, but to stand firm, offering the best of yourself without constantly seeking validation. Rejection hurts because we take it personally. We believe their lack of communication, harsh words, or indifference are direct reflections of our own failures. But what if I told you that much of their behavior has more to do with their own internal struggles than with your roots? Maybe they're not stopping to gather your fruits because they're carrying too much weight in their hands, or because they're so lost in their own steps, they can't see what surrounds them. This doesn't mean justifying everything they do. It means understanding that their distance is not necessarily a judgment of your worth as a parent. It's a sign that they, too, are searching for their place, stumbling, making mistakes, and learning. And that, even if it hurts, is part of their journey. Instead of taking rejection as an offense, see it as the wind passing through your branches. It doesn't define you. It doesn't change who you are or everything you've done. Your worth is not measured by how many people choose to rest under your shade, but by the strength of your roots and the beauty of being a tree that remains standing, even when the paths of others lead them far away. So take a deep breath and let go of that burden. You are not less because of the moments when your children seem to forget you. Keep being the tree you are, firm, generous, and present. In the end, many will return, maybe not today or tomorrow, but they will. And when they do, they'll find the same shade and the same fruits you always offered, without the need to demand explanations for their absence, because that is your greatest act of love, being there without depending on being acknowledged. Number 7, embrace uncertainty and find peace in the chaos. Uncertainty is like an ocean in the middle of a storm. The waves toss you around, the wind roars, and every time you think you found your footing, another wave pulls you back into the unknown. No one likes being lost at sea. It's uncomfortable, terrifying. And sometimes it feels like everything is beyond your control. But what if I told you that you don't need to calm the ocean, that your peace doesn't depend on the waters settling, but rather on learning to navigate through the storm? In life, uncertainty is the only certainty. The Stoics understood this very well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not let what you cannot control disturb you. Focus on what you can." Yet when it comes to our relationships with our children, this idea seems especially difficult to accept. We want everything to be clear, predictable. We want them to always love us, to respect us the way we imagine, to look back and see that all our decisions were the right ones, and to never doubt everything we did for them. But life doesn't work that way, and here's the secret: it doesn't have to. We think uncertainty is the enemy when, in reality, it's a teacher in disguise. Every time you don't know what to say to your child when they ignore you, every time you fear you're not enough to repair a broken relationship, every time doubt takes root in your mind, you have a unique opportunity, not to fight against what you can't control, but to accept that life, with all its storms, is still navigable. The calm you seek isn't in the absence of uncertainty, but in your ability to stop resisting it. Maybe today, you're wondering if you're losing your children, if there's more you could be doing to reach them, if the silence you sometimes feel is a distance you'll never be able to close. It's okay to feel that anxiety, but don't let it consume you. Ask yourself, what can I do right now, here and now, to offer them my love without conditions? You don't need the guarantee of a perfect outcome. You don't need everything to be crystal clear. You just need to show up as you are, human, with doubts, with fears, but willing to try again and again. I once heard the story of a sailor who, after years of navigating stormy seas, said it wasn't about taming the ocean, but learning to dance with it. That is the art of embracing uncertainty, letting go of the need for everything to be safe and perfect, and finding in the chaos an opportunity to grow, to trust in your ability to adapt, to discover that even in the storm, there is beauty and purpose. Life with your children will always be a shifting ocean. Sometimes it will be calm, and other times it will be challenging. But as long as you stay in the boat, as long as you remain willing to navigate with patience and love, you are fulfilling your purpose. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the unknown isn't so frightening when you choose to face it with courage. Because, in the end, it's not about controlling the waters, but trusting that no matter what happens, you'll find a way to stay afloat. And speaking of trust, the next step may be the hardest, but also the one that can free you the most. If you think we've already reached the deepest point, there's still one more step to challenge you and transform the way you see this stage of your life. Number 8, turn expectations into curiosity. The problem with expectations is that they're always hungry. No matter how much you try to feed them, they always want more. You expect your kids to call you every day, and when they do, you expect that call to last more than 5 minutes. If it lasts more than 5 minutes, then you expect it to be a deep conversation, not just a list of trivialities about their day. It's like trying to fill a bottomless pit, and in the end, the only constant is frustration. But here's the interesting part. Expectations are a problem you can solve because they're not out there in your children's behavior. They're right here in your mind. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic masters, said, "When you stop expecting things to happen as you wish, you can enjoy them as they are." What this thought offers is a radical shift in perspective. Instead of viewing your children's actions or lack of actions as a constant test of your worth as a parent, you can choose to focus on what's actually there rather than what should be. And to achieve this, I want to suggest a simple challenge you can start today. Here's the habit. Every time you catch yourself expecting something from your children, a call, a gesture, a change in attitude, pause for a moment and turn that expectation into a curious question. For example, if you think, Why don't they call me more often? Change it to, what's keeping them so busy right now? If the expectation is, they should respect me more, transform it into, what can I do to better understand what they're going through? The key here isn't to justify what they do or don't do, but to train yourself to replace judgment with curiosity. Neuroscience supports this exercise. Recent studies have shown that when we adopt a mindset of curiosity instead of judgment, our brains respond differently, opening pathways for empathy and reducing emotional reactivity. It's a small change, almost invisible, but it has a huge impact. When you change the question, you change the emotion, and with that, the dynamic of the relationship changes as well. Applying this may feel uncomfortable at first because, let's be honest, we like holding on to our expectations. They give us a false sense of control, as if having a perfect script in our minds could guarantee everything will go the way we want. But life, and especially your children, don't follow that script. And the sooner you accept that, the more space you'll have to discover the freedom of connecting with them without the chains of how things should be. When you finish watching this video, I want to invite you to try something different. Think of a recent moment when you felt disappointed because something didn't go the way you expected. Reflect on what you were expecting and what question you could have asked instead of getting stuck in judgment. Write it down if needed. The next time you face a similar situation, try out this habit. Not only will you be practicing Stoic philosophy at its finest, but you'll also be retraining your mind to find possibilities instead of limitations. In the end, turning expectations into curiosity is an act of liberation. It's letting go of the weight of everything you think should happen and opening yourself to what actually is. You don't need to control every interaction with your children to enjoy it. Sometimes the most valuable thing isn't receiving exactly what you wanted, but discovering something unexpected you would never have noticed if you were too busy expecting. Try it, because maybe in the act of asking more and demanding less, you'll find the connection you've been searching for all along. Number 9. Cultivate patience as your greatest act of love. In 1812, a young Ludwig van Beethoven, already completely deaf at that point, sat in front of a piano to confront not only the absolute silence of his inner world, but also the constant rejection and misunderstanding from those around him. His patrons demanded more commercial works, his environment questioned his solitary and difficult nature, and his deafness pushed him further away from even the simplest human connections. Yet, instead of surrendering to resentment or despair, Beethoven did something extraordinary. He channeled all that frustration and silence into creating one of his most sublime pieces, the Ninth Symphony. That masterpiece, famous for its ode to joy, not only marked a milestone in music, but also became a reminder of what it means to practice patience when faced with what we cannot control. Beethoven couldn't change his deafness or the way others perceived him. What he did was accept that reality with courage and patience, turning it into something that exceeded even his own expectations. That same patience is what we need to cultivate in our relationships, especially with our children. Sure, you're probably not composing symphonies in your living room while waiting for them to answer a message or show a little more interest in what you have to say, but the principle is the same. Patience is not just the ability to wait, it's doing so with serenity, without letting circumstances drag you into resentment or bitterness. Stoicism reminds us that the only thing we truly control is our attitude toward what happens. Marcus Aurelius said, "Patience is a strength of the mind in the face of inevitable difficulties." And that's what it means to love with patience. Letting go of the need for everything to happen at your pace and accepting that every relationship has its own time, its own process. It can be frustrating, especially when you feel like you've already done everything you can. But patience is not a sign of weakness or resignation. It's an act of trust. From the perspective of positive psychology, it's been shown that patience is closely linked to our ability to regulate emotions. Practicing it not only helps us handle difficult situations better, but also creates space for reflection and growth. When you stop reacting impulsively and choose to wait calmly, you allow things to evolve more naturally without forcing or pressuring. And often, it's in that space where connections begin to heal and grow stronger. Think of your children as unfinished works of art. Every interaction, every conversation, even every silence is like a brushstroke on a canvas that's not yet complete. You may not always see the immediate result, but with patience, you're contributing to something greater. Beethoven never heard the ovation his Ninth Symphony received. He was completely deaf, but that didn't stop him from creating something magnificent. In the same way, your patience can plant the seeds of change that you may not see immediately, but which will have a lasting impact. The next time you feel impatient with your children, remember Beethoven's story. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what can I transform right now, even if the circumstances aren't what I'd like them to be? Maybe you can't make them call you more often or change their attitude overnight, but you can choose to show them that the most genuine love is not the one that demands immediate results, but the one built with time, tolerance, and faith in the process. Because in the end, patience is that, an act of love that leaves deeper marks than any impulse or momentary reaction. Reaching this point is no coincidence. If you're here, it's because you care. You care about reflecting, seeking answers, and finding wiser, calmer ways to build or rebuild the relationships you value most, even when the storms seem hard to navigate. I want you to take a moment to acknowledge that because not everyone dares to look inward with honesty and accept that, although we can't change the past or control others, there is always something within our power. Our attitudes, our words, and above all, our ability to love from a place of strength and freedom. What we've talked about today is not just about resolving conflicts with your children. It goes beyond that. It's a reminder that even in moments of distance, silence, or rejection, you have the power to choose how to respond, how to stay true to yourself, and how to keep showing love without depending on external validation. That's real strength, the kind that doesn't need to be proclaimed or defended because it's felt in every decision you make. And when you cultivate that inner peace, you become a beacon, not just for them, but for yourself. Now I want to invite you to share something with me. Write this phrase in the comments. Today, I will respond calmly to the chaos of life. Also, let me know which country you're watching from, knowing that these words are reaching different corners of the world and that together we're reflecting on such important topics is what gives meaning to this space. If this video resonated with you, if you believe it could help someone else facing a similar situation, don't hesitate to share it. Sometimes, a small message at the right moment can make a big difference in someone's life. And don't forget to subscribe to keep exploring topics that help us live with more wisdom, serenity, and purpose. Remember, you don't need to have all the answers today. Your relationship with your children and with yourself is a journey built day by day with every choice you make. And no matter how big or small the step, what matters is that you keep moving forward. Thank you for being here, for reflecting, and for giving your best on this journey. See you in the next video.